There's a specific kind of exhaustion that nobody warns you about. It's not the kind that comes from staying up too late or working too many hours in a row. It's quieter than that, more stubborn. It's the kind that finds you in the middle of a perfectly fine Tuesday afternoon when you're sitting at your desk or standing in line for coffee, and out of nowhere, something inside you just deflates. Like a slow leak. Not a dramatic collapse, just a slow, steady loss of pressure that you've been patching over for so long, you almost forgot what it felt like to be full. I know that feeling well. I've been on a first-name basis with it for years. I used to think that being strong meant never letting that feeling show. I had built what I thought was a very convincing performance. Steady voice in meetings, calm face in conversations, the kind of person others would describe as put together or someone who always has it figured out. And for a long time, I let that description become my identity. I wore it like a jacket I never took off, even when I was alone. What I didn't understand then, what I wish someone had set me down and said plainly, is that performing strength and actually having it are two completely different things. One is a costume. The other is something you build slowly, badly, and mostly in private. The performance, though, that one I'd mastered early. There's something uniquely lonely about being the person everyone else assumes is fine. People check on the ones who cry openly, who say, "I'm struggling," who let the cracks show. But if you've trained yourself to hold the face still, if you've gotten good at the quick subject change, at the "I'm tired, but it's fine," people believe you. They have to. They're carrying their own weight. They're not looking for the gaps in your armor, because from where they're standing, you don't appear to be wearing any. So you end up in this strange position where you're surrounded by people and still profoundly alone with whatever is actually happening inside you. I spent a lot of years in that gap. The space between the version of me that other people saw and the version that sat quietly in the dark of my own mind, asking questions I didn't have answers to. The loudest one, the one that came back again and again, was this: am I actually okay? Or have I just gotten very good at pretending to be? Here's the part that's a little embarrassing to admit. There were nights, ordinary weeknights, nothing dramatic, just me and my phone and the weight of everything I hadn't said to anyone, where I would scroll through other people's lives and feel something I can only describe as a kind of hollow shame. Not jealousy exactly, something more complicated. Something like watching everyone else seem to move through the world with some kind of ease you were never given the instructions for. Everyone looked like they were doing it right. The curated meals, the weekend trips, the captions that implied they had figured out the balance between ambition and joy. And there I was, genuinely unsure whether I had eaten a real meal that day, carrying a to-do list in my head that never got shorter, wondering why I couldn't just feel lighter. I don't think I'm unique in this. I think a lot of people live there, in that weird purgatory between performing fine and actually falling apart. The modern world has a remarkable way of making isolation feel like a personal failure. Like if you were smarter, more disciplined, more grateful, you wouldn't feel this way. The information age tells you that every answer is available. Every solution is searchable. Every form of self-improvement is a download away. So if you're still struggling, if you're still tired, if you're still not sleeping well at 2 a.m. with the blue light on your face, well, that must be on you. That logic kept me stuck for longer than I'd like to admit. The turning point wasn't a moment. I want to be clear about that because I think we do people a disservice when we suggest that healing or growth has a specific dramatic scene, a speech, a sunrise, a conversation that changes everything. For me, it was more like an accumulation of small, unglamorous realizations. The first was that I had been running on a kind of internal narrative that told me I didn't have the right to slow down, that resting was quitting in disguise, that if I stopped pushing, even for a day, something essential would unravel. I had built my sense of worth entirely on output, on what I produced, accomplished, survived. And somewhere in that framework, I had quietly stopped asking whether I was actually okay with any of it. The second was harder to face. I had been incredibly unkind to myself for a very long time, in ways I would never be unkind to another person. If a friend had come to me and said, "I haven't been sleeping, I cry sometimes and I don't know why. I keep pushing through, but I'm not sure what I'm pushing toward," I would have sat with them. I would have said, "That sounds hard. You don't have to have all of this figured out. You're allowed to be tired." But when it was me, when it was the voice in my own head, I responded differently. I responded with a list of reasons why I didn't have time for this, why others had it harder, why what I was feeling wasn't valid enough to take seriously. That double standard, once I saw it, was impossible to unsee. I've learned something about the version of myself that asks those quiet, hard questions late at night. The one that wonders if the strength is real or just a story I keep telling myself. The one that asks, what's the point of trying so hard when no one sees it anyway? That version is not weak. It's actually the most honest thing about me. It's the part that hasn't learned to perform yet, the part that refuses to be packaged. It asks inconvenient questions at inconvenient times because it's still paying attention, because it hasn't given up on getting a real answer. For years, I treated that part of myself like a problem to be managed, an interruption, something to get through quickly so I could get back to being functional. Now, I think it might be the thing that kept me grounded, the internal voice that refused to fully believe the performance, that kept pulling at the thread, that wouldn't let me completely disappear into the role. There's a version of resilience that the internet sells very well. It looks clean. It has good lighting. It's usually accompanied by a morning routine and a quote about being unbreakable. The resilience I know looks different. It looks like crying in a car before walking into a building and then walking in anyway. It looks like not having a reason to explain why you're low, but choosing to stay soft to yourself regardless. It looks like telling someone, "I'm not doing great," and sitting in the discomfort of having said something true. It looks like giving yourself permission to not be in motion every second of every day, to sit with something unfinished, to let a feeling exist without immediately trying to fix it or explain it or outrun it. The most counterintuitive thing I've learned is that stopping, really stopping, not scrolling, not distracting, just sitting with whatever is actually there, doesn't weaken you. It's one of the few things that actually builds something real underneath all the noise. I'm not going to tell you it gets easy. I've read enough of those pieces to know how they land, and honestly, they always feel a little borrowed, a little too resolved. Real life is messier than that. Some days the questions come back louder. Some seasons the exhaustion returns, and it takes longer to find your footing than it did the last time. But I'll tell you what I do know. You don't have to have proof that you'll make it to keep going. You just have to take the next step without the proof. That's not naivety. That's actually what courage looks like from the inside. Not certainty, not a feeling of being ready, just the decision to move anyway, while being completely unsure of the outcome. The nights when I asked myself if anyone would ever see the effort, the silent kind, the invisible labor of just holding yourself together. I've come to understand that the answer doesn't actually change the value of the effort. The work is real, whether it's witnessed or not. The decision to get up, to try again, to be honest with yourself even when it's unflattering. That happened. It counts. It's yours, even if it's quiet, even if no one names it. There's a version of you that has been carrying something heavy for a long time, probably longer than you've fully acknowledged. And that version, the one that keeps showing up, that keeps asking the hard questions, that sometimes feels embarrassed by how much it still hurts, even after all this time. That version deserves more than another push to be stronger. It deserves to be seen, honestly, without the performance, without the jacket you never take off. Not by someone else first, by you. That's the thing I kept waiting for someone to give me. Some external permission, some recognition, some proof that my efforts were visible and therefore valid. And I think a lot of us wait for that. We wait for someone to notice, to say, I see how hard you've been working. I see what this has cost you, before we allow ourselves to feel like it was real. But the seeing has to start with you, not as an act of pride or self-congratulation, just as a quiet, honest acknowledgement. I've been here. I've kept showing up. On the days I didn't want to. On the days I didn't know why. I kept going. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. The kid inside me who keeps asking if it's all worth it. I've stopped trying to silence that voice. I've stopped treating the question as a threat. These days, when it comes up, I just sit with it for a moment. I don't rush to answer. I let it be a real question, not a crisis. And then, eventually, I look at how far I've walked from where I started. Not to compare, not to measure against anyone else, just to remember that the distance is real. And I smile, not because I have it all figured out, I don't, but because I'm still here, still asking, still walking. And somehow, that has always been enough to take the next step.